What are we discussing on today's Locked on Diamondbacks podcast? We'll discuss Merrill Kelly's second to last start of spring training as he looked sharp once again. But of course, we'll talk about the big breaking news, Blake Snell to the San Francisco Giants. How does it shake up the NL West?
You are Locked on Diamondbacks, your daily Arizona Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked on Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. You're listening to who? Or is charismatic host of this podcast, Millard Thomas. I was not prepared to record a podcast today on the San Francisco Giants, but when you get the reigning Cy Young Award winner to a division foe, you got to talk about it. So we'll break down Blake Snell to the Giants, what it means for the NL West, and of course, some more spring training D-backs talk. But before we get into any of that, I just want to say thank you for making Locked on Diamondbacks your first listen every day. I would not be able to do this podcast without you, my loyal listeners, sharing, subscribing, reviewing, doing all that so I could do this podcast for you. Thank you. It's free. It's available on all platforms, so please continue to tell your friends. One of those platforms is YouTube, so please hit subscribe to Locked on Diamondbacks on YouTube. We're trying to hit 1,000 subscribers before opening day. We're about 10 days away. We're getting dangerously close to both 1,000 and the regular season. So please hit subscribe to Locked on Diamondbacks on YouTube. And today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/lockedonmlb and use code all lowercase LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. But before we get into any talk about Blake Snell and the San Francisco Giants, let's first talk about the D-backs and spring training, because on Monday we got to see Merrill Kelly against the Oakland A's, and as Merrill Kelly should do, he looked fantastic against the Oakland A's, had a few up-down innings, and overall his final stat line, 3.1 innings pitched, no earned runs, 4 hits allowed, 1 walk, and struck out 7. Merrill Kelly looked really good in his second to last start of spring training. He's looked good the entire spring training. He had like one outing where he gave up a couple earned runs, but for the most part, he's looked really good. He's been able to throw all his pitches effectively. He's been able to generate whiffs as he always does. He's throwing his full arsenal this spring training. He's working on his secondary stuff. He's going deep into his outings. He's generating strikeouts. Like, everything you would want to see from Merrill Kelly, coming off the heels of a World Series where he pitched a ton of innings last year, has pitched a ton of innings for the D-backs the last couple of years since 2020, has really been a workhorse for the D-backs. So Merrill Kelly came into this camp a little bit slower in terms of his progression, the ramp-up period throughout spring training. D-backs want to take it slow with their 2 best starters, Zach Gallen, Merrill Kelly. Makes sense coming off a long postseason. You don't want to overwork these guys in the games that don't matter. You want them to build up their arm strength as we get closer to the regular season. As we saw on Sunday start, Zach Gallen looked really good. Then Monday start, Merrill Kelly, more of the same. The 2 D-backs frontline starters look really good as we enter the regular season. Zach Gallen already named the opening day starter, which surprises absolutely no one. He was an absolute stud last year, Cy Young finalist, and is going to be in the mix to win the Cy Young Award this year. Now with Blake Snell coming to, re-signing with the NL team will make it a little bit tougher in terms of that field for the Cy Young, but Zach Gallen should be right there in the mix. If he can improve on what he did in the second half last year, he might run away with the Cy Young Award in 2024, but I think every D-backs fan feels good about the front line rotation. Zach Gallen, Merrill Kelly, one of the best in Major League Baseball. Merrill Kelly, in that Monday start, generated 11 whiffs on his 28 swings. He looks really, really set up for the regular season. I don't think anybody has a doubt for Merrill Kelly as their number 2 starter. Zach Gallen, bona fide ace, and Merrill Kelly, quietly a bona fide number 2. I mean, what he did in the postseason last year, there should be no more question marks on the type of pitcher Merrill Kelly is. Like I told Javier Reyes of Locked On Padres on a crossover recently, I think he's the best pitcher without any accolades in Major League Baseball. No all-star appearances, no Cy Young votes. Merrill Kelly, year in, year out, the last few years with the D-backs since 2020, workhorse, mid-threes ERA guy, good command, not giving up a ton of walks, decent strikeout rate, like everything you would want. Run prevention, the strikeouts, the pitching deep into ball games, the clutchness, the cojones factor in big moments. Like Merrill Kelly does absolutely everything, and it's why we love him as our number 2 starter. We saw him in Monday's start throw every kind of pitch he has. He threw 6 different pitches according to StatCast. His changeup was able to generate a bunch of whiffs. He looks ready for the regular season. Zach Gallen and Merrill Kelly both look like they're in regular season form. And for Merrill Kelly, one of his big goals entering the season is to once again have at least 200 innings pitched on his resume for this year. And I think that is a very attainable goal, but also a goal you don't hear everybody say. A lot of people want to be load managed. They want to keep their pitchers healthy for the postseason, which I agree with that strategy, but you also need to win games in the regular season to get to the playoffs. Merrill Kelly is a guy, when he's cooking, he can go 6-7 deep. Back in 2022, 200 innings pitched. Back in 2023, last year, 177 innings pitched. And he's been a guy, 3 of his 5 seasons with the D-backs, at least 175 innings pitched. So he's been a workhorse with the D-backs throughout his career. His 162 game average with the D-backs is 201 innings pitched per season. So Merrill Kelly is fully healthy for this year and pitches around 33 starts. He probably will crack the 200 inning mark once again this upcoming year, which will be his 14th year professionally if you count his overseas as well. So Merrill Kelly, a little bit older, 35 years old, but still looks like he's fresh and in his prime. I think Merrill Kelly is only getting better with age. So super excited for the start of the regular season. Gallen on opening day with Merrill Kelly as the number 2 right behind him. One of the most deadliest frontline duos in Major League Baseball, and it will be the frontline duo that leads us back to the postseason this upcoming year. And then some other notes from Monday's game against the Oakland A's. Paul Sewald pitched a very clean inning, 2 strikeouts, and the most important thing, velo slowly starting to get closer to his average from last season. Still not exactly there, but typically, like his fastball velo and his sweeper velo was like 2.5 to 3 miles per hour lower than what it should be. In Monday's game, it was only about 1.5 miles to 1.8 miles per hour slower. So start to tick at least in the right direction. We saw Kyle Nelson come in. He pitched a clean inning. Very important for Kyle Nelson because his ERA all of a sudden 3.6. Now you can make the argument Kyle Nelson has looked the best this spring training. No earned runs on Monday. And like we've been talking about in that lefty battle, it's a close competition. And who knows, maybe Kyle Nelson re-established himself with Monday's performance. And now maybe he's back in the lead for that lefty competition. I think, like we've been talking about, going to come down to the final day, going to come down to the wire of who the D-backs pick to be their 2 lefty relievers in the bullpen. Kyle Nelson once again made a name for himself with his outing on Monday. Jake McCarthy, he's still trying to be that 6th outfielder for the D-backs. He had a couple hits on Monday. He seems to be playing better over the last couple weeks. His slash line now is up to 289, 308, 421, but I still think the D-backs are going to go with 2 backup infielders. It feels like a Blaze Alexander and a Elvis Andrus are probably the 2 most likely answers, but who knows? Maybe Jake the Rig McCarthy is still in the mix to make the opening day roster, but I would say it's unlikely. And then some other dudes from this game who are trying to make the opening day roster. Jace Peterson, we forgot to mention him in the battle for backup shortstop, but he went 0 for 3 on Monday. I just don't see him as a guy, even though he's under contract. Like, I feel like it has to go to Blaze or Elvis Andrews because I think they're both better than a Jace Peterson. Same with the Kevin Newman, who also played on Monday. He had a hit, but again, I just don't care because I don't think Newman or Peterson really offer you any value. At least Blaze Alexander, young upside guy. Elvis Andrews, longtime MLB veteran who still saw defensively with some plus speed. So I would go with Blaze and Elvis, but Peterson and Kevin Newman are still in the mix for now, I guess, for their respective roster battles. Then the final note from this spring training game, Gabriel Moreno returned to the lineup. He looked good. He was able to pick up a hit and a healthy Moreno as we enter the season. Really, really important for the D-backs. Has a potential to break out even further and maybe ascend to a top 5 catcher or better in the sport. Gabriel Moreno, huge swing piece for this D-backs team. We know what he could do defensively, but offensively, if his bat takes another step forward, just another major offensive piece in this D-backs lineup. And I'm really excited to see the kind of damage this lineup can do once we get to the regular season. Now I want to talk about how Blake Snell shakes up the rankings in the NL West. But if you want to play a little fantasy sports app and potentially win some money, one of my favorite places to do that is this little thing called Prize Picks, because football season may be over, but the action on the floor is heating up. Whether it's tournament season or the fight for playoff home court, there's no shortage of high-stakes basketball moments this time of year. Get in on the excitement with Prize Picks, America's #1 fantasy sports app, where you can turn your hoops knowledge into serious cash. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000 with NBA, NHL, and college basketball entries today on Prize Picks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. I can't help but pick LeBron whenever I'm trying to make my little selections, because I feel like you just have to go with the GOAT whenever money is on the line. And if you want to win some money, just download the app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, download the app and use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. All right. Welcome back into the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. If you like the show, please follow me on Twitter at CreatorThomas24 for the personal account, or look up Locked On Diamondbacks both Twitter and Instagram for the podcast handle. And as you know, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel, Locked On Sports Today. Baseball fans, mark your calendars for March 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern for the best MLB season preview, coming exclusively to Locked On Sports Today on March 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern. Be the first to get local insight from the MLB local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network. Find it on March 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern on the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channel app. And speaking of that little crossover preview that we got coming, I want to say we recorded that thing 3 weeks ago. You're going to hear me give some takes on the Giants. I just want to be known, I gave all those takes pre-Chapman, pre-Blake Snell. I'm not going to spoil the pod at all, but I just want to say all the takes I had, we recorded that weeks ago before the Giants and even the Padres made their move. So my takes seem a little bit outdated. That is why when it comes to that podcast. But now let's get back to the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast and talk about Blake Snell to the Giants, because this was one that we've been not expecting, but it's been on our radar because it's felt like it's been either the Houston Astros or the San Francisco Giants that have been linked to Blake Snell over the last month or so. So it was like, who's going to get him? Is it going to be the AL Astros or the NL Giants? Of course, as the Locked On D-backs host, I was hoping it was going to be the Astros, make the field easier for Cy Young, for Zach Gallen, make the division easier for the D-backs and the playoff field overall. But now that Blake Snell is going to the Giants, we have to talk about how this shakes up the NL West. As I got to be honest, like at the time of us recording the, that crossover roundtable preview, I wasn't in on this Giants team. I didn't think that they were going to be very good. I thought this was going to be another year where the Giants, on paper, I don't like. They probably do better than the expectation level I have for them, but they're probably still a 78-win team. But since we've recorded that, they've added Matt Chapman to go along with their Jorge Soler. Now you got Blake Snell. They traded for Robbie Ray. They signed Jordan Hicks. They brought in Murphy as well. They traded away the Del Scafanis, the Striplings, the Hanigers. Well, now when I look at this Giants offseason, I got to say, you know what? Giants have had a good offseason. They've improved this team. I like this team better than last year. I think it has a little bit more upside with the Chapmans and the Solers, a little bit more upside, especially from the power department. I look at the rotation. Logan Webb finally has a number 2 in that rotation. And if Robbie Ray comes back and looks good, in August or whatever, now you have a 3-headed monster in that rotation, which I like. But if you're asking me, are the Giants now World Series contenders after this Blake Snell move? The answer for me is probably not. I like this team a lot more than where they were, at the midway point of February when there was no Chapman, when there was no Snell. But I still don't think, since they've made the moves, they are now in the upper echelon of teams. Are they now in the Braves or Dodgers level? No. Do I think they're as good as even the Phillies or the D-backs? Probably not. I think the Giants are a playoff contender, but not a World Series contender. I can still see the Giants be good enough to make it to the playoffs and, be a little feisty once we get to the postseason. Could I see them winning 2 rounds and get into the NLCS? I don't know about that. But can I see them winning at least a wild card round? I think that's possible. When you have Logan Webb and a Blake Snell and a Robbie Ray, I think you're going to be good enough to win a wild card round, especially if you got guys like Jorge Soler that could change the score with one swing of the bat. After the Giants acquired Blake Snell, their odds for the playoffs jumped dramatically because I was looking at this in real time. And honestly, it's being updated in real time because at one point they were plus 145 after the Snell deal. But since I've looked at this, since it's been 2 hours since I've last looked at the odds for NL teams to make the playoffs. These are the Giants' odds now to make the playoffs. It's the whole NL field. They have all their odds right here. The Dodgers are minus 7,000 to make the playoffs. Braves minus 3,500, Phillies minus 230. Those are the top 3 teams to make it to the NL playoffs. And then after that, it's Cardinals 4th, Cubs 5th. And then you actually have your Giants, 6th most likely team to make the playoffs from the NL teams at plus 115, Padres 7th at plus 120, and then D-backs plus 125. So after the Snell and C signings, the D-backs have moved to 3rd favorites in the National League and the whole field to potentially make it to the postseason, which I think is a little bit crazy. I would still put the reigning NL champs as a better chance to make it to the playoffs as opposed to a Giants or a Padres. I mean, let's give a little respect to the National League champs who went into the offseason and got better, but that's how the odds have changed since the Giants and both the Padres too, I guess. Since they've acquired 2 new starting pitchers, their odds to make it to the postseason have drastically changed. And if you even look at the division winner, it's a little bit different, which is kind of weird. If you think the Padres and Giants are more likely to make it to the postseason, then why wouldn't you have the same for the division? Because for the division, the Padres and D-backs are tied at plus 1,100 to win the NL West. Giants are 4th in the division at plus 1,200. So still basically neck and neck, those 3 teams in terms of their odds to win the NL West. But I think that's kind of weird. Why would you think the Padres and D-backs are tied to win the NL West with the Giants 4th, but then you think the Giants are the most likely team to make the playoffs? I think that's kind of weird. But I say all that to say this. Blake Snell has drastically improved the odds for the Giants. I think he's an actual needle mover to go along with their other moves. Great offseason by the Giants. I think when I look at that team now in the division, I would still have Dodgers number 1. I would have the D-backs number 2 out of respect, but now it's a real neck and neck race between the Padres and Giants. I think the Giants are I think the Padres, are way more top heavy, but I think the Giants probably have a higher floor because I think they do have better depth. Maybe not all that depth is, star quality talent, but their lineup is at least deep in terms of above average major leaguers. The back end of the rotation is interesting, but I think their bullpen is another strength of that team. I don't know if I love the number 4, number 5 starters for the Giants, but their top 3 could be good if Robbie Ray's healthy. Their bullpen's going to be stacked, and I do like the depth of their lineup. So I think the Giants have a higher floor. I think the Padres have a higher ceiling. So I would say those two teams are neck and neck for third, with the Rockies way behind the other teams in the division. And then if you look at the rotations, like, it's a real question mark after the Dodgers, who has the best rotation, because you could say the D-backs, Gallen, Kelly, Erod, and then of course if Fott looks like playoff Fott, like that's going to be a major swing piece. But the Padres with Cease, Musgrove, Darvish, and then maybe Michael King, like, Darvish is a huge swing piece in terms of how old is he going to look this upcoming season. The Giants, if you tell me Robbie Ray looks like he didn't skip a beat coming back in August, like, that rotation looks pretty good all of a sudden. I think I would still have the D-backs rotation second, because I think their top 4 is the most trustworthy outside of the Dodgers in the NL West. I think I trust the top 4 in the D-backs rotation more than the Padres or Giants. But once again, you can make a solid argument for the Padres or Giants rotation being better than the D-backs. So this Blake Snell move was a real needle mover for the Giants. The Giants still don't scare me as a World Series team, but as a playoff contender, I definitely think they're going to be frisky in the regular season. I definitely could see them making it to a wild card round. I probably don't think that they're going to the NLCS, but was this a winning move by the Giants? Are they having a fantastic offseason? Did they improve from last year to this year? Yes to all those questions. And now the D-backs are going to be in a thick race with the Padres and the Giants to win the division and to make it to a potential wild card spot. I will talk about which division will send the most playoff representatives in 2024. But before we get into that conversation, if you think the D-backs are going to win the NL West in 2024, then why not go to FanDuel Sportsbook and place a little futures bet down? Because say goodbye to busted brackets, because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tourney. Whether you're betting on a big upset or a 1 seed, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bet if your first bet of $5 or more wins. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who's going to win it all. My favorite thing to do now that we're back in baseball season is I take the D-backs money line and I do a little same game parlay with that. Give me D-backs money line, give me Corbin Carroll over on total bases, and give me Ketel Marte RBI. That pays out at plus 300. I'm putting some money down. And if you want to put some money down, just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut down those nets. Fire TV is your destination for sports, from live games to in-depth analysis. Fire TV has absolutely everything that a sports fan would want. It offers amazing viewing experiences with smart TVs, as well as a Fire TV stick that you can plug into your existing TV that provides access to millions of movies and TV episodes, as well as free and live TV. Whether it's opening weekend for baseball or the college basketball tournament, you're going to want to have a Fire TV. Fire TV recently created Fire TV channels to deliver a constant supply of the latest videos from your favorite sports brands, all for free. That includes all of us at Locked On, plus most of the big pro leagues and college conferences as well. Fire TV channels let you dive into all of the game's analysis, highlights, and more to keep up to date on all of the latest in the world of sports. March Madness, NBA, MLB, and lots more. Not to mention great news, entertainment, gaming, travel, cooking videos as well. Check out Fire TV channels on Fire TV and Alexa devices. If you haven't checked out Fire TV channels, you should. Trust me on this. To learn more, visit www.amazon.com/lockedonfiretv. All right. Let's get back into the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. Let's talk about which division will send the most representatives to the playoffs, because for this exercise, I'm already going to say Dodgers, you get the NL West. Braves, you get the NL lease, which means the field that I'm playing with, because I'm not going to talk about every team that's available to make it to the postseason. These are the teams I actually think can make it to the playoffs. This is my field I'm going to be discussing. The Marlins, the Giants, the Padres, the Reds, the Cardinals, the Cubs, the D-backs, and the Phillies. That means, I'm sorry, Milwaukee Brewers, maybe you make it as a wild card team this year. I just do not believe in you, so I'm not going to talk about you in this exercise. New York Mets, same thing. Maybe this is your year. Maybe you have a big bounce back with the Lindors and the Pete Alonsos, but I'm not going to talk about you. Pirates, maybe you break out. Same with the Nationals, but we're only going to talk about the teams that I just mentioned for this exercise. And we're actually even going to dwindle down our list because, like I said, Braves and Dodgers we're not going to talk about. There's two more teams I don't want to talk about. I'm penciling in the Phillies. I don't care. That lineup is stacked. You got the Harpers, you got the Real Mutos, you got the Schwarbers. Like, that team is going to score runs. You still got Wheeler and Nola. Like, for this exercise, we're talking if every team is healthy, the best version of each team. How do I like each team? How do I like them stacked up? Which teams do I think are most likely to make it to the postseason? Philly, I'm penciling in as a wild card number one. And then guess what, guys? I'm going to be biased. I'm penciling in the D-backs as a wild card team right now for this exercise because I think it's a fair thing to do. The NL champs that got better, I think it's fair to pencil them in as a wild card team. So I'm going to do that. So that means Braves, Dodgers, Phillies, D-backs, I take off of this list. So from the remaining teams, who do we think has a chance? Which division do we think has a chance to send the most teams to the National League playoffs? And since we cut down those four teams, that automatically means the NL Central is out on this category. They could send two teams, their division winner and one wildcard team, but I think there's no chance that they send three. I think the NL West or NL East, I think one of those divisions will at least send three to the postseason, which I don't think the NL Central will do. But even with that being said, we'll still talk about the NL Central and work through their case. So let's talk about the case for each team as to why or why not they can't make it to the postseason. The Marlins, they have one of the deepest rotations in Major League Baseball. You get a full year of the trade deadline guys like the Jake Burgers, the Josh Bells, but I still don't know if the Marlins, if Jazz Chisholm, if he doesn't stay healthy, I still feel like the ceiling on that offense is super low. I still think, even though their rotation is super deep with the young guys, I still think there's some variance in that rotation. I still think there's a lot of question marks because of how young and inexperienced that rotation and team is. I think the lack of experience overall for that team can hurt them. So even though I love the youth and think they have one of the deepest rotations in the sport, I think the lack of experience and maybe Jazz's health history could hold that team back. The San Francisco Giants, I think the ceiling of that team is still a big question mark. Blake Snell, Logan Webb, legit frontline duo. Chapman and Soler is going to help that lineup, but I don't know if you have any stars in that lineup. I don't know if there's still anyone that I'm scared of. Jorge Soler had near 40 home runs last year, but if he doesn't come close to that number, how scared are you actually of that Giants lineup? For the Padres, I think what I would be worried about is the top heaviness of that team. After like the top five in your lineup, I think there's big question marks in that Padres lineup. And if a guy like Machado or Tatis misses time, how do you keep up the offensive production? Are you worried about the age of Yu Darvish? I think those are the biggest question marks for me. For the St. Louis Cardinals, it has to do with the age of that team, specifically that rotation that is so old with the Sonny Grays and the Kyle Gibsons of the world and the Miles Mikalases. Like, that rotation is old for the St. Louis Cardinals. The Cubs, do they have enough difference makers? I like Justin Steele, but I don't know if he scares me. Shoto Imanga, we'll see what he looks like. Cody Bellinger is a stud in that lineup, but how about the rest of it? Big question marks for me. A team like the Cincinnati Reds, I think it just comes down to experience most of all. I think they are a super talented team, but I think that rotation, a lot of question marks. I don't know if they have enough quality talent in that rotation. And again, like the Marlins, just lack of experience overall. So when looking at all those teams, and if I already have the D-backs and Phillies slotted into 2 wildcard spots, which team do I think is most likely then to make it to the playoffs of the field I just mentioned? My pick, even though I like the Marlins and the Reds with their youth movement, I don't think I would pick either of those teams. The Marlins, I just don't know if I trust their offense enough, despite how much I love that rotation. For the Reds, I don't know if I love that rotation enough, despite me thinking that lineup is going to score a good amount of runs with how deep it is, especially if guys in that lineup take a step forward. The Giants, I think, are a playoff contender, but I don't think they would be my pick to make it to the wild card. The Cubs, I just don't like that rotation enough on paper. And so for me, I think the team that I'm going to ride with will be the San Diego Padres to be the 3rd wild card team. I think it's because I think Tatis, full season of him, going to have a big season for the Padres. I think we get a Manny Machado bounce back. And most importantly, the Padres were already good last year. 3rd best differential in the National League at plus 104. They just weren't good in run score games or like runners in scoring position. Stats are not exactly repeatable. So I think the numbers suggest regression to the mean, positive regression for the San Diego Padres. And because of the top end talent that they still have, I would pick them to be the 3rd wild card team to make it to the National League playoffs in 2024. Now, that's it for this edition of the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. Come back tomorrow for more Diamondbacks news coverage and insight. And as always, stay safe, stay healthy. Doses.